think it's quite common to have far more RPGs in your bookshelf than you can realistically play. I think it's much easier to buy a book than it is to find people who are willing to play, then get a group together, agree on a system, plan a campaign, and get everyone to commit to a schedule. There was a point a few years ago when I was resigned to never playing the majority of games I owned. I was just happy to have them. But that changed when I discovered solo gaming. And since I learned how, there's now no game I own that I can't play whenever I feel like it. In the last few years, I've tried out far more systems than I had in my whole life leading up to the moment I tried one game. And here it is, Ironsworn Starforged, the first solo game I tried, and a behemoth of solo and GM-less role-playing. You might know about Ironsworn, the dark fantasy, vaguely Nordic-inspired, GM-optional and free, by the way, narrative game. Well, Starforged is the follow-up, using the same framework but updated and refined. Yet, unlike the dark wilds of Ironsworn, we're now in the dark void of space, piloting a faster-than-light ship, exploring the frontiers of a new galaxy, the Forge. Ironsworn Starforged comes as a meaty and dense hardback, as Powered by the Apocalypse games often do. It's nicely bound with 2 bookmarks, which is good because you'll almost certainly need them. The book is scattered with these amazing full-colour, high-fidelity illustrations. There's essentially 3 main sections. First, an introduction to the rules. Second, a gameplay section that guides you through world and character creation, and then walks you through the moves. And finally, the Oracles section, with tables to generate planets, settlements, factions, or just to ask for inspiration. Like I mentioned, Starforged is very much a Powered by the Apocalypse style game. So the base idea is that you play out the narrative with a fiction-first mindset until you do something that triggers one of various moves. The text of that move tells you how to proceed. So let's say that I want to get past a security checkpoint. I decide to talk to a guard and play out the conversation, explaining the situation and trying to appeal to her sense of empathy. Well, now I've triggered the compel move, which says when you try to persuade someone or make them an offer. It then tells me that if I'm charming, pacifying, or encouraging someone, I should roll plus heart. And what that involves is rolling 3 dice, 2 10-sided and 1 6-sided. The 6-sided die represents my attempt, and the 10-sided dice represent the factors working against me. And since I'm rolling plus heart, I get to add my heart bonus from my character sheet to the d6. I'm aiming to exceed the numbers rolled on the d10s. If I beat both d10s, I score a strong hit, which tells me the guard will let me through and I gain +1 momentum. If I only beat one of the d10s, I score a weak hit, which tells me her agreement comes with a complication or a condition attached. And if I beat neither d10, I score a miss, and either she refuses or her agreement comes at a steep cost, and I've triggered a new move, Pay the Price. I love the elegant way that the moves and dice rolls interact, generating their own difficulty without feeling too random, and then leading you into the next part of the story. It's such an easy way to play without a GM. You can play on your own, noting down what happens until you trigger a move, or you can play with a group, each taking an equal part of the narrative. But equally, you might prefer a guide, someone who's more familiar with the rules, who can determine for you if a move has been triggered and call for a roll. It's a common idea in solo role-playing that prep is play, and this is especially true for Starforged. The book guides you through that first play session to help you flesh out the setting, your character, and their starting situation. You begin with truths. These are a series of D100 rolls to build your own version of the galaxy. The base assumption is that sometime in the past, your people left their galaxy and arrived in the Forge, building a new frontier. Otherwise, you roll for why they had to leave, how they did it, what they found in the Forge, and what society is like now. As you go through these truths, you start to get a sense of the story you might want to experience, and start being inspired by the world you're building. And once that's done, you'll likely already have a character concept in mind. And then building the character is fairly simple. You assign bonuses to 5 stats. Bear in mind these are fixed and won't change as your character gains an experience. But then you pick assets. These are unique aspects of your character, and unlike stats, these will change and grow over time. I have them as an optional extra deck of cards, but you can download them for free. There's one thing that the game assumes you have automatically, which is a starship equipped with an Eidolon drive to traverse the vast distances of space. But otherwise you pick 2 paths that grant you special abilities based on who your character is, their experiences or training. They could be a roguish pilot, or a bounty hunter with a unique set of armor. And then you pick another asset. That can be a module for your starship, a support vehicle, a companion, or another path. Your character also needs a background vow, a goal that drives them, that might form the backbone of your main story arc. Next, you need a starting location. The book guides you through creating the basics of a sector in space, home to a handful of habitable planets and space stations. You learn a little about each settlement, its governance, its projects, and its problems. This is all done by rolling on extensive tables towards the back of the book. And as you work through this process, you'll build a map of your sector and the charted routes through space between settlements. Now there's one more thing left, an inciting incident. If you're new to solo games, I recommend starting right in the action on a mission. Your roguish pilot might be running a blockade, being chased by the authorities. Or perhaps your armoured bounty hunter has their target in their sights. The flow of play revolves around 4 kinds of progress tracks that fill at different rates depending on their difficulty. There's Iron Vows, which are missions or quests, expedition tracks for exploring new areas, combat tracks for fast-paced action, and relationship tracks that represent your bonds with the people and factions of your story. As you make progress along these tracks, you discover the story by making moves. Often, progressing one track will start a secondary track. For example, you might be following a bounty mission and track your quarry to a derelict space station, meaning you now have a second expedition track to follow as you explore this new area. And since you rarely run out of tracks to follow, you never really run out of story either. And the kinds of stories you can tell are as numerous as the stars in the Forge. There's a whole world of expansion options for this game, so I'm just going to highlight a few of them. First is the official expansion, Sundered Isles, which reflavors the base game as a fantasy Age of Sail adventure. It adds plenty of options, like a whole new deck of character assets, many of which are cross-compatible. So you can either play a standalone Sundered Isles campaign, or use Sundered Isles content to enhance your Starforged game, or even go somewhere in between with airships in the sky above floating islands. or Treasure Planet-style sailboats in space. I also own a few third-party expansions. There's Ancient Wonders by Ludic Pen, that massively expands on a trope I love that has some presence in the core book, and that's the idea of discovering the remnants of precursor civilizations and the ruins, megastructures or hazards that they leave behind. Second, I want to highlight Starsmith Expanded Oracles by Play Every Roll. This book includes every rollable table from the base game and triples its content, as well as adding extra tables. I use this book in nearly every GM-less game I play, not just Starforged and not just solo games. Out of all 120 or so RPG books I own, I use this one the most. And lastly, to give an example of what's available, I want to mention Iron Valley by M. Kiran. This is a standalone Starforged hack that emulates cozy farming games like Stardew Valley and Harvest Moon that uses promises to friends to progress the story instead of iron vows. Something that struck me as odd when I first played Starforged is the decision not to include the character assets in the core book. I remember flicking through trying to find them, only to realise I had to download them separately. They are available for free, but for someone like me who prefers the tactile experience of physical books, it was a little disappointing. I spent an unnecessary amount of time printing and cutting each asset card before eventually deciding to buy the card packs. And now I have these packs, I've got another problem, which is that I own a few third-party asset expansions, but if I wanted them to match the official assets, I'd have to get them printed and shipped as card decks. I realise a lot of this is my own neuroticism. If there are two core aims of Ironsworn Starforged, it's to be both a narrative-first game and a GM-optional game. It's perhaps more famous for the latter as an often recommended solo game, but let's put that aside for a moment. As a purely narrative game, Starforged stands out. The clear writing, extensive tools, and the way that the core mechanics interact to progress the story make every session feel like you're discovering the plot rather than writing it yourself. It can take you in surprising directions and is especially good at stacking complications, constantly raising the tension. And then as a solo game, Starforged is of course a giant in its own playground. But before I really looked into GM-less gaming, I had never heard of Ironsworn or Starforged. I considered myself pretty savvy and had a reasonable collection of RPG books from both small and large developers, but it was this game that opened up a whole new world to me. It was a gateway to many other small games, and it taught me new things and let me enjoy my hobby in a completely new way. Maybe there are people out there following a similar path, to whom Ironsworn and Starforged are relatively unknown, and who might be about to unlock this entirely new way of enjoying their hobby. And if you're one of those people, well, you're in for a treat. Thank you ever so much for watching this far. I like to keep these reviews concise, but this might be a bit of a longer video. It's just such an expansive game that I have a lot to say about. If you enjoyed the review, please do subscribe. I've got some really interesting and unique indie games in my queue coming up that I think deserve a little attention. And we might even take a tentative step outside the world of solo games for a change. If you want to suggest a small or indie game for the queue, please do. And I'm really curious who people are planning to vote for in the Crit Awards this year. Oh, and one more thing I should probably mention. I started a Ko-fi page recently. It's not to charge for anything. The reviews will always be free, no gimmicks, no gated content. The Ko-fi page is just there if anyone is both eager and able to support the channel, as well as to give me a space to write articles if I fancy it. Now, I wasn't expecting to have to create a credit screen already, so for now, I'll just say thank you a million times to the channel's very first supporter, Ides of March. It really means a lot to me. And until next time, happy adventures.